So we will proceed our next topic. It will be presented by Dr. Nimi. She is well-known diabetologist, ex-fellow, All India Institute of Diabetes and Research. Her topic for today's research review meeting is therapeutic inertia in the management of dyslipidemia and hypertension in incident type 2 diabetes and the resulting risk factor burden. It is a real-world evidence from primary care. Thank you, Dr. Nimi, and you can share your slides and start your presentation.
Is it visible?
Yeah, it is visible. Go ahead. Put it on slideshow.
Yeah, I'm just doing that. Yeah, done.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Yash Patel, Dr. Rumandru, Dr. Vishal Bhai, and Dr. Sushil Bhai for inviting me here. Today's my topic is therapeutic inertia in the management of dyslipidemia and hypertension in incident type 2 diabetes and the resulting risk factor burden in the real-world evidence from primary care. This article was published in Journal of Diabetes, Obesity and Metabolism in recently, February 2021, and it is done by Dr. Sanjay Paul, Dr. Kamlesh, Dr. Olga, and Dr. Joanna Lay. Hypertension and dyslipidemia, we all know, are major causes of premature death worldwide, with more than 50% of patients with hypertension not being able to achieve adequate control. The burden of these conditions are especially high in patients with diabetes. 55% of people who are on cardioprotective medications, they consistently fail to maintain clinically acceptable blood pressure and lipid control over the course of 2 years after therapy initiation or intensification. One of the reasons for suboptimal cardiometabolic risk factor control or persistent risk factor burden is the failure or delay in providing appropriate treatment intensification at correct time, otherwise known as therapeutic inertia. This study was done in UK by using the UK primary care database. They saw more than 254,000 people with incident type 2 diabetes and dyslipidemia or hypertension with mean of 5.3-year follow-up. They were observed. And the analysis were shown that the overall prevalence rate of dyslipidemia and hypertension were similar at the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, 66% in both. But there was a significant increase in prevalence of dyslipidemia, particularly in people younger than 60 years in last decade, last 10 years. In the dyslipidemia cohort, those who were initiated lipid-lowering therapy after 1 year and had high ASCVD risk with having smoking as a risk factor, grade 2 obesity, and type 2 diabetes with HbA1c above 7.5. They had significantly higher probability of failing lipid control at 2 years of follow-up. In hypertension cohort, regardless of baseline ASCVD risk factors, those who were initiated antihypertensive therapy late had a significantly higher probability of systolic blood pressure control failure than those who were on AHT started early. The weakness of this study was, however, non-availability of reliable data on lifestyle advice for risk factor control and medication adherence data. But the conclusion was drawn that there is a significant delay in initiating cardioprotective medicines when needed was observed in people with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, especially young onset, a young age group. This resulted in a very high probability of clinically unaccepted blood pressure and lipid burden during disease progression. And irrespective of the baseline ASCVD risk status, earlier cardioprotective treatment initiation may reduce at least 20% of uncontrolled lipid and blood pressure burden at population level. Findings presented in this study strongly suggest revisiting the guidelines for proactive management of hypertension and dyslipidemia, particularly in people with young onset of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nimi. very nicely presented. The study reminds me that we are all like Duryodhan. We all know what our dharma is, but we are not following it. And this is a reminder. But something additional that struck to my mind. Of course, there are three issues with lipids and blood pressure control. We start very late. Number one, once we start, we don't see whether it is controlled or not. And number three, most of the people stop it considering they are not very useful drugs. So these are three issues. But something that struck my mind was there is nothing like HbA1c for blood pressure and lipid that really shows your last 3 months or 6 months control in blood pressure and lipids. So just like because of HbA1c, we have come to a conclusion that maintaining a normoglycemic milieu within first year of detection of diabetes really helps in reducing the cardiovascular burden. If there is some marker in lipids and blood pressure that would help us to realize whether keeping normotensive milieu and normolipid milieu within first year of diagnosis would really make a changeover as far as the cardiovascular disease burden at a later stage is concerned. And that really shows that HbA1c has really made a huge difference in diabetes, and something of those sort of markers are required. But what we learned is start antihypertensive treatment very fast whenever indicated, and see to it that it is effective and it is continued. Same way, start statin at the earliest possible indication, see to it that it is effective, and then it is continued. Once again, over to Vishal.
I absolutely agree with you, Urman Dhruv sir, that HbA1c actually changed the paradigm of diabetic protocols. But my question is, we all know the guidelines of which systolic blood pressure or LDL we should maintain. How frequently do we do that in especially patients with younger onset? We see LDL somewhere around 80, 90, 100. How often do we emphasize on lipid lowering medicines in especially young type 2 diabetic? How we usually focus on reducing the sugar levels or blood pressure for that matter. We like to keep it somewhere below 130/80. But what about the LDL levels? Because in this study, the acceptable LDL levels were surprisingly 32.4 milligram per deciliter in low risk, in high risk, and for low risk patient, 46.8 milligram per deciliter. So if these are the real values that we should be keeping in mind, what is your experience and your take on the real life LDL values that we keep?
Right, I agree that our values are even much worse because this is a study from UK. It has to be better, but because they follow the guidelines reasonably well, our results would be even poorer. And that's why I said that starting early, looking for the control and then maintaining it for a prolonged time is very, very important. And one more thing too, once you said this, one more struck to my mind, that maintaining glycemic control requires frequent blood checking. Glucometers are costly, glucose sticks are costly, it requires invasive procedure, and the drugs for diabetes are reasonably costly. Look at the lipids and blood pressure. The blood pressure instruments, once you purchase, just you have to spend for power, nothing else. Easy to monitor, the drugs are reasonably cheap. Lipids you have to manage only 6 monthly. The drugs are reasonably cheap. So the better options we are neglecting and the difficult option we are concentrating. So this is another important idea that came to my mind. Well, Dr. Vishal.
Yes, sir. Nicely commented. Actually, most of the times when we are treating a patients, the diabetic and dyslipidemia, we are looking forward, but the HbA1c we are asking for 3 months and lipid maybe 6 months or 1 year. If we need to stringent our targets, we need to stringent our diagnosis or investigative schedules also we need to change, maybe. Sir, so is there
Can I have one comment? Can I have one comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just going through this article and the vigorous methodology on the same, and even when we are interacting, we are seeing any metabolic syndrome patient is at least giving us history of 20 years from the initiation to the life. And when we see that how good the glycemic control had supported us in the background of ASCVDs or the complications. In the same note, if we see the monitoring of hypertension or the blood pressure or the dyslipidemia, if we can document for a longer duration and compare it with the complications and the comorbidities, that would be a real support. So that gives me an impact to enroll all of us to maintain our records and compare it over a time. And that was in the background. Yeah. Let's see how we can work on it. Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you, Urman sir, for those comments. I really appreciate it.
And that yes, at a time when we know that despite controlling glycemia very well, if blood pressures are not controlled, kidneys are going to be affected. So despite knowing that blood pressure control is easier to achieve, easier to monitor, less costlier, we all probably ignore it.
There is one message in the chat box saying, what are the measures to be taken to control dyslipidemia along with pharmacological therapy, especially in older age group? This is from Dr. C.D. Lokesh.
Yeah, obviously lifestyle changes or lifestyle modification would be of importance. But the age group that you have said, probably there the lifestyle changes would be very difficult to make. So unless the patient is obese, BMI high, lipids very high, and patient has no cardiovascular problems, then the lifestyle changes like vigorous exercise under medical supervision and diet control with the fat control would be of help. That is where RSSDI slogan would also come into use, that replace fat with protein rather than fat with carbohydrate. That can be of lot of help.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your comment. Thank you, Dr. Nimmi.